I think I was going to ask you about aliens. So we've talked about aliens quite a bit since we brought it up. So, I don't know, that's a wide topic by itself. I'm of the opinion we're something like a spirit in a body, and we can incarnate here from all sorts of other star systems, and there's all sorts of wonderful, complicated stuff going on. I guess I can't say for sure, but...
Well, if you could say for sure, that wouldn't be any fun.
Huh.
So yeah, I'm there with you on the mysteries of the universe.
Yep.
And the multiple dimensions and the multiple worlds and the little pieces of the puzzle that all sorts of interesting people bring to your awareness because of their broad life experience.
Huh.
So I personally have not had a run-in with aliens. However,
Are you sure? No.
I'm pretty sure. However, I have had very interesting conversations with people who have claimed to have run-ins with aliens. And so I value everyone's life experience. The closest I think that I can get to understanding multidimensionality is when I was working with a group of psychics and they decided to use my brain as the mediator brain because I didn't have any judgments about each of them and they all were having ego clashes with each other. So they put me in the center of
You were the mastermind.
I was the empty mind.
Oh, okay.
I was the empty mind and the empty ego and the open heart. So people whose egos would get in the way when they were trying to have meaningful conversations would come and I would mediate, and they would basically use my brain to put the image into, and then I would relate that image to the other person, and then the other person would use my brain to put the image into that brain, and I was just the mediator, literally. So I had enough telepathic ability to be able to understand the messages that were coming from each person, even if they were nonverbal. And then I could verbalize that message in a way that didn't irritate the crap out of the other person. And using my people skills and my sensitivity and as an empath to be able to relay a message that did not relay hostility or threatening or any of that kind of stuff. And then they would be able to send back a message to me. And those conversations, as fascinating as they were, often talked about what their guides were trying to say to each other. And so we had people from the one planet trying to talk to people from another planet through these three humans that were having this very strange conversation.
Sure.
So I was kind of young at that time. I was probably early 20s. Didn't even know what a Palladian was, didn't know what any of these star systems that they were referring to and battles that they were talking about. And then Star Wars came out. And the funny thing was, one of the guys that was working with us in our Egyptian mysticism group was actually ended up being a consultant on Star Wars.
Okay.
And so a lot of the stuff that had been going through my brain, I recognized quite clearly as having been communicated to people in the movie industry in terms of how they framed some of that work.
Huh.
Well, that was kind of fun. So that was my first encounter with people that had alien experiences. Then much later in life, I learned how to channel while I was meditating. And I had a master that I was working with, and he very clearly was able to channel through me, and so I learned how to do that. But being that he was a very powerful male figure, I kind of, after a while, I was like, I don't really like hosting male figures in my being. And just, I don't entirely agree with the Saturn teachers and the way that we should go. And there's a thing for a woman that happens if she's channeling. I think it's very difficult sometimes to channel male figures without it actually beginning to affect your physiology and your metabolism. And it's hard to clear out that much powerful male energy. I think I personally had that problem. Now, there's probably techniques and there's probably mediums that do it perfectly well, but for me, I was beginning to feel affected by it. So I kind of shut down that channel and I said I am no longer going to be channeling for these particular entities or these particular beings. And really what I want to do is I want to concentrate on my own femininity and my own relationship with the energies that work better with the feminine being.
Okay.
And so I started reaching out to people that were doing more moon work and more shadow work and some other things. And I found it less invasive than I had found channeling to be. And I still felt like I could knock on the door of someone if I needed more information. But I didn't need to give them the whole stage.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here. I didn't want to interrupt, actually, but so the Saturnine energies are they're about control, boxes, cubes, sort of, a lot of times there's a black box or a black hexagon symbology and so on and so forth, which is just a cube turned on its side from one perspective. And so it's sort of rigid and control-based, really.
Yes, it really is.
So, no, why? I guess what got you into a significant effort? Sounds like years you spent studying.
Honestly, I didn't spend time studying. I was moved from position to position and ran into people that made requirements of me that I had to figure out what was going on in the moment. I do not have a broad literary experience with reading books on things. I mean, I'm familiar with certain authors like Carlos Castanedas and
So were they?
Colin Wilson and some of those.
Did people pick you then to do channeling?
Yeah, more powerful entities and people on the planet were using my particular blend of sensitivities and empathy and receptiveness for a messenger role. I was like a pretty much a messenger role. And it took me a while to take ownership of those skills, talents, abilities, and to not allow more powerful people to use them, unless I choose to. But at that time, I was just kind of like being moved from one spiritual experience to another, where I would meet this person that would immediately recognize I had some value to their organization and put me in some level of the hierarchy that protected me in some way from the norm of everyday life. And then my brain would be used in a certain way. So that's been happening to me since I was about 20 years old. And now I'm much older than 20.
Do you think that's part of your lesson, is to set boundaries and be like...
boundaries is not...
Be in your own control and...
Boundaries and control are kind of a Saturnine mentality. It's more of relating to a broader sense of wholeness and representing a being that is loving and has a higher quality of energy than the species and people that I had been formerly representing.
Okay.
That's how I would put it.
So, do you think of yourself as a being then?
I recognize that I am a soul moving through the spiral of life.
Okay. So I wanted to circle back a little bit, I guess.
Or spiral back.
Well...
I'm just joking.
Oh, that's a good point. So, I guess, do you consider humanity to be a natural part of Earth, or does it seem like we're maybe something separate from the outside in, or is it just that we live a certain way that makes it feel separated?
Well, it's funny that you use natural, because that's such a click word these days.
Yeah.
Anything that exists is part of nature.
Sure.
In any universe, in any dimension, everything, it depends on how broad a hermetic kind of view you take on this.
Right.
It is all light. It is all energy. It is all created by the same creator. So there is is it a logistics question? Like, were human beings created here? Did we evolve here logistically? So logistically speaking, I mean, and of course now we're talking about territorialism and who was here first and who
Sure.
deserves what and all that crap. You know, I kind of just view the whole of being as little pods for learning
Okay.
at different vibrational frequencies. And so who's ever here to experience this pod at this time is the owner of this time and space.
Okay.
Did they steal it from somebody that was here before? You know, did their culture have the right to the land or all of these things? Those are all territorial debates that I don't really get into, except I grieve with others' sense of loss, which I recognize as an illusion, but I still grieve with it.
Well,
I
let's
don't
say if we were, I had my little game I was playing, and you were playing a game, and then someone else came along and just
Stole your toys.
smashed my toys, and I couldn't play my game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not a unjust or incorrect way of looking at it. That this person's cramping my style and keeping me from arguably learning the lessons that I want to learn. But well, so at least on many levels, and I think on most, if not all levels, life is very subjective. So, we exist as, for example, bodies, and we've got the atheists who are looking at the science and the chemicals and all that. But, we exist as a legal entity, we exist as a social creature, we exist as a emotional creature, we exist as a psychological person. So, and most of those are almost entirely subjective. So, I mean, when I deal with things like this, okay, well, did you really talk to aliens? Did you really channel someone? I mean, it's not really my place to say, well, you just made it all up. Even if some of the interpretations are technically incorrect, it's really the experience, and that's the experience is subjective anyway.
You bring up a very interesting point. And when I first began having these experiences, I often wondered if it wasn't just all in my head.
Sure.
Because the first experiences that I was having did not concern other people. They were just me hearing some sort of sounds. I mean, almost like, am I schizophrenic? I'm hearing these voices, things are talking to me. Are these demons? Am I going to be, guided to murder somebody? Or, I mean, you have all that weird fear because, this is a very fearful area. So the whole imagination thing, I'd really like to speak to that.
Okay.
Because I first started having these experiences, and my first human reaction was to go to a trusted friend, to talk to my mom about it, to see what was going on. My mom, luckily, was already a student of the Edgar Cayce materials, and she was already pretty well versed in things, and she could frame some of my experiences for me in something other than a schizophrenic diagnosis. And then as I developed closer friendships with people who had actually studied some of these things, they would be able to give me more specific answers as to what I was going through. So it's kind of like you start on the path and then people
Sure.
are there to support you. But I remember my turning point in terms of understanding that this was not just all happening in my head. I went to a group meeting in the Catholic Church basement, and we were channeling lost souls. I happened to be the one that came up with sensitivity of a...
Was this a Catholic group or non-Catholic?
It was a
group?
non-Catholic group, but the Catholic churches were really nice about letting us do multicultural, multi-religious things in their basement, and they would rent out the space to us. So there was a nun floating in the upper right-hand corner of the room, and I saw her, and then the mediator of the group, he said, Carolyn, what do you see? And I said, well, there's a nun floating at the top,
Right.
of the room there. And being that I was young, they all kind of chuckled whenever I explained things. And so they said, well, let's just invite that soul to come into our central energy field, and let's see if we can bless her and send her, back through the light. So we went through to this whole experience, and I was the one describing what she was doing.
Sure.
It was like watching a TV in my head, and I could see everything that she was doing. And then just before she entered, and she told her life story and why she was afraid to leave and the whole thing. And I'm just going along for the ride, thinking that everybody in the room is a little bit crazy because they're listening to me, number one, and I'm just making this up, number two. Okay?
Right.
So at the very end, she's just about to go into the light, and she turns and she smiles and she waves this very sweet, like, thank you kind of vibration to me. Just very peaceful and loving,
Yep.
And so I didn't say that to anyone in the group. I didn't mention what she had done as she was actually entering the light.
Right.
And at the end of the session, this Indian fellow, and I don't remember whether it was White Feather, or I'm sorry, I just honestly don't remember his name. Okay, but he was a really cool and powerful looking person, And he came up to me afterward and said, that was a really powerful ceremony. We really did a good job, blah, blah, blah. And he said, and I really liked her final goodbye.
Right.
And he makes the exact same hand gesture. And for a man, he managed to gets a very sweet look on his face. I mean, he definitely channeled what she was doing in that moment. I swear to God, it absolutely made me want to drop.
No.
So, and I think he did that intentionally because he knew I was young and I was questioning things and I didn't know what was going on. And he was validating the experience for me.
Yeah.
So after that, I realized that that it does feel very much like you're using your imagination, because that is a capacity of your higher mind that needs to be able to be freed up in order for you to be sensitive enough and open enough to be able to receive things and to not judge them and kill them and send them aside, lay them dead on the ground beside you.
Yeah. So I've always felt that this sort of stuff is like, say, reading body language or even facial features. It's something that, let's say back when we were monkeys or cavemen or however we formed, we had to develop this ability to be empathic with someone else, or even if they feel pain or if they're smiling or if they're shifting around or where their eyes are. You've got to use your imagination to interpret these objective and physical things to kind of get it in their mind. And I don't think it's any different if you're picking up on energy or radio waves or whatever it is. I think it's the same. We're saying the same thing, the same capacity. Your imagination fills in the blanks or figures out what the meaning of that is.
Maybe strings together symbols in a way that is coherent.
Sure.
Because when you're talking about reading facial expressions and reading, sometimes there's a really strong bias that allows you to misread. I happen to have personal relationship with somebody who thinks he can read everybody's mind and thinks that he knows what they're thinking and whether or not they're being truthful and whether or not they're an honest person.
I'm just laughing because I had a coworker and friend, associate, I guess, and he was like, I'm a body language expert. I know, blah, blah, blah. And it was just very...
Exactly. And so... So I'm a little hesitant to put that level of rational analysis in the same category as the free-flowing imagination,
Right.
because the big dividing point there is the non-judgmental frame of mind. Okay. So people that are reading are filtering and analyzing and deducing. People that are channeling are open.
Okay.
They're not necessarily processing. They have set processing aside for the moment, and they are simply openly experiencing and communicating.
But do you believe that imagination is part of both reading and channeling?
Okay, now you're getting into terms.
Well-
Let's see. And it is, terms are very important because that's where all the confusion lies.
Yeah, most arguments are about what the argument is about and the definition of words. So I agree.
So I need you to restate that question one more time. And you're using
With-
channeling and reading synonymously and in the same breath almost.
Okay.
And they are two different things.
So if I understood right, you said that imagination is a faculty that's in use. So is that in use during channeling, imagination?
Yes.
Okay.
Imagination is the form the posture that your brain takes in order to be receptive.
Okay.
So
That's
if
right.
you're doing a yoga position and you get into a certain position to increase the flow of energy to your liver, whatever energetic posture your brain gets into for you to be able to receive messages is most closely associated with the same faculties that you use when you are trying to imagine something. Imagine meaning to visualize, to birth an idea or a form that was previously unmanifest.
Yeah, I think